Imagine being deeply in love, building a life together with someone who shares your dreams. Then, out of nowhere, pressure from family pulls them away, pushing them to make an unimaginable choice. That's the story of Luke, who thought he'd found his forever with Hannah, until her family's obsession with having a grandchild pushed them into territory he never expected. When he found out Hannah was willing to go to shocking lengths to meet her family's demands, he was left with a choice of his own: to stay and fight, or leave everything behind and start fresh. This story dives into the power of family expectations, betrayal, and the pursuit of personal freedom. Ready to see how Luke takes back control of his life? Let's get into it. Hannah and I had been together for 5 years, married for 2. We'd met back in college, a time when our dreams seemed to line up perfectly. She was ambitious, driven, and like me, she wanted to delay any talk of children, focusing instead on our careers and personal goals. It felt like our intentions were always aligned, or at least that's what I thought. College days faded into memory, and we began building a life together, steady and intentional. We were in sync until the pressure from her family began creeping into our lives. It was subtle at first, but her mother, Victoria, had a certain way of planting seeds. She would say things like, "Wouldn't it be lovely to have a little one around?" Hannah would smile, brush it off, but I could tell it lingered. I could sense Hannah was starting to internalize it, even if she didn't want to admit it. Her sister, Alyssa, played a role too, struggling with fertility issues of her own. Alyssa seemed eager to fulfill their mother's desire for grandchildren, but her challenges only increased the pressure on us. It was like there was a growing storm between Hannah and her family, with me caught in the middle, feeling more like an outsider each day. As much as I wanted to brush it off, their expectations were beginning to affect us. The tension between Hannah and me wasn't obvious, but there was a new distance, a sense of dissatisfaction lurking in the silence. The family pressure only grew louder over time. Victoria's words became more pointed, her frustration more evident. At a recent family gathering, she expressed it openly, mentioning how badly she wanted to become a grandmother, her gaze shifting pointedly toward Hannah and me. I tried to offer Hannah support, to reassure her we were on the right path, but I could feel her retreating. She became more reserved, almost like she was pulling away from our life together. It hurt, knowing that something was driving a wedge between us, something that wasn't even coming from within our own relationship. Things began spiraling from there, though I clung to the hope that Hannah and I would stay united. Still, I could see that the weight of her family's expectations was beginning to chip away at her, at us. There was a silent battle between our plans and her family's desires, and I started to wonder how long we could keep going like this. Each day felt more strained, with a looming uncertainty about what lay ahead. It was unsettling, realizing that our once solid intentions for the future might not be enough to hold us together. Victoria's desire for grandchildren was never hidden. Over time, it became almost an obsession, something she spoke about as if it were her life's purpose. Alyssa, Hannah's sister, struggled with fertility issues, and it seemed she was desperate to meet their mother's expectations. It was strange, watching how the family's collective desires started shaping Hannah's thoughts. Victoria would drop hints, and each time, I'd see Hannah go quiet, a look of concern crossing her face. It was like satisfaction in our own lives didn't matter anymore, only theirs. That shift in Hannah, that look in her eyes, was my first clue that things were changing between us. Then came a family gathering that I'll never forget. Victoria, growing more impatient, decided to voice her frustration out loud, right there at the table. She talked about the ache of waiting to be a grandmother, and even went on about how she'd hoped Hannah and I would prioritize family sooner. It was an awkward, almost humiliating moment, with all eyes on us. I felt the tension swell in the room, and I could see Hannah shrinking, uncomfortable, but not opposing her mother's comments. It was like a shift in Hannah's loyalty, a hint that her intentions were being swayed in directions I couldn't control. From then on, Hannah grew distant, her behavior subtly different. She stopped sharing her thoughts as freely, and I could feel her drawing inward, especially when we were alone. Conversations felt strained, like there was an invisible wall between us that hadn't been there before. The way she responded to me changed. It felt like she was holding back, and her usual warmth was slowly being replaced by a kind of guardedness. I wanted to break through to her, to bring back the Hannah who was always so open and intentional with me. But each attempt seemed only to widen the gap between us. It's strange, that feeling of watching someone drift away while standing right beside them. Hannah was right there, but she felt unreachable, lost in some inner battle. I started questioning if she was happy, if there was anything I could do to turn things around. It felt as if I was slowly losing her, little by little, and no amount of reassurance on my part seemed to make any difference. And yet I held on, hoping that whatever this phase was, it would eventually pass. Little did I know, this was only the beginning. At the next family gathering, I couldn't believe my ears. Victoria, with her usual sharp tone, suggested something unthinkable. She said, without a trace of hesitation, that Hannah should consider having a child with Aaron, Alyssa's husband, to give the family the grandchild it deserved. I sat there stunned, waiting for anyone, to react, to see the absurdity of her words. But instead, there was this unsettling silence, a few nods even. My mind raced, trying to process what I was hearing. The idea was so twisted, so against everything I thought our family stood for. It felt like a cruel joke, only no one was laughing. I could hardly find the words to respond. I glanced at Hannah, expecting her to be as horrified as I was. But she just sat there, silent, her face unreadable, giving me no reassurance, no indication that she thought this was as outrageous as I did. It was as if I didn't even know her anymore. I felt a surge of anger and betrayal. How could she stay quiet, let alone seem to consider this proposal? The tension was unbearable, and I finally had to say something. I voiced my disgust, my absolute refusal to let this absurd idea even be entertained. But the room's silence, their passive acceptance, it was a punch to the gut. As I spoke, I could feel their eyes on me, a mix of pity and disapproval, as if I was the one being unreasonable. They had twisted intentions, each one of them, and it was clear they were standing behind Victoria's insane suggestion. And there was Hannah, standing with them in silence, not defending me, not defending us. It was like I was invisible, like I was just an obstacle in their way. I felt an overwhelming sense of isolation, a realization that this wasn't just a difference of opinion. It was a fundamental betrayal, one that left me questioning the very foundation of our relationship. Leaving that night, I knew things had shifted irreparably. Hannah's loyalty was no longer with me. That much was clear. I looked back at her, searching for any sign that she understood the gravity of what had happened. But she only looked away, as if the decision had already been made in her heart. For the first time, I felt completely alone, shut out from the life I thought we'd been building together. It was as if I were standing at the edge of something dark and uncertain, knowing that I could no longer trust her to stand beside me. In the months that followed, things spiraled quickly. The pressure from her family didn't ease up. It only grew stronger, as if each passing day was a countdown to their twisted plan. Hannah began spending more time with them, the distance between us growing with each visit. I tried to reason with her, to remind her of everything we'd built together, of our intentions for a life based on mutual respect and support. But each conversation seemed to end with her saying that I just didn't understand. I could see it in her eyes. She was already slipping away, caught in a world I couldn't reach. Then one day, she was simply gone. She left a letter on our dining table, her handwriting shaky, but her words firm. She was going to her family's estate. She wrote to think things through and, in her words, to do what felt right. The satisfaction I had felt in our life together seemed to crumble in those moments as I read her words over and over, trying to make sense of it. She ended by asking me to respect her decision, to allow her to fulfill her mother's wishes for the sake of family. It was beyond betrayal. It was as if the woman I loved was someone entirely different, someone capable of prioritizing her family's demands over everything we'd shared. I was left feeling hollow, humiliated even. The life we'd built, The promises we'd made to each other now felt like nothing but illusions. I kept looking around our home, at the pieces of our shared life, wondering how it had come to this. Days turned into weeks, and I began to accept that she was gone. Not just physically, but emotionally. She had chosen a path that left me completely out of the picture. I knew then that the only option left for me was to walk away from the remnants of our life, to start over somewhere far from her influence and the toxicity of her family. With a heavy heart, I started planning a new future for myself. Canada felt like the right choice, a place to rebuild, to find a new sense of purpose, and to finally close this chapter of betrayal. It was hard, letting go of the dreams we'd once shared, but I knew staying would only keep me chained to the past. So I packed up, ready to leave the country and the memories behind. As I boarded the plane, I made one final promise to myself. I would find satisfaction in a life that I built on my own, one that no longer depended on Hannah or anyone else. Starting fresh in Canada felt like stepping into another world. The distance was a relief, offering me space to rebuild, to find a new version of satisfaction on my own terms. I got a job, set up a modest apartment in Montreal, and threw myself into the daily routines of a new life. Each day brought a little more clarity, a little more distance from the betrayal that had upended everything. I began to feel a sense of freedom, even a glimmer of hope for the future. Canada became my sanctuary, a place to finally focus on my intentions without the shadows of her family looming over me. But Hannah's family didn't seem willing to let go. They'd reach out, calls, emails, messages from her mother, Victoria, and even Alyssa, each one attempting to reel me back in. Each message was a reminder of the family's grip, their endless persistence. Victoria would leave voicemails, speaking as if we'd had no disagreements at all, urging me to reconsider and come back. The very idea made my skin crawl, and each message only strengthened my resolve to stay as far away from them as possible. My friend Alex became my closest ally during this time, a voice of reason that I could lean on when things got hard. He encouraged me to stay strong, reminding me of everything I'd already sacrificed to escape that toxic situation. Our conversations kept me grounded, a reminder that I didn't have to face this alone. He'd often joke that I'd already paid my dues and earned the right to build a life without their interference. His support was exactly what I needed to maintain my determination and keep Hannah's family at arm's length. Despite their relentless attempts to contact me, I stayed firm. I knew returning would only drag me back into that web of manipulation and twisted intentions. Canada was my fresh start, and I was determined to make it last. I wasn't going to let them disrupt the life I was building here, a life where, for the first time, I could truly set my own course without compromise. It felt like I was finally finding my footing, a new satisfaction in my independence that I'd never felt before. Months passed, and I was finally beginning to feel settled in my new life when, unexpectedly, Hannah reached out one last time. This time, it was a video call, and despite everything, a part of me needed to see her face, if only for closure. When her image appeared on the screen, I was startled by how much she'd changed. Her face was drawn, her expression weary, almost like the weight of all her choices had finally caught up to her. She started to apologize, her words stumbling as she tried to explain, to make me understand. But I could see it in her eyes. Regret mixed with a longing to go back to a life we'd both left behind. I listened, but the ache of betrayal didn't leave me. Hannah's words felt empty, as if no apology could bridge the gulf between us. She spoke about family, about feeling trapped by their expectations. But those explanations only reminded me of the decisions she'd made and the pain they'd caused. I felt a strange mix of pity and detachment. Seeing her now, so worn down, didn't bring the satisfaction I'd expected. I realized then that I had already moved on in a way she hadn't. The life I'd started in Montreal had become my foundation, something real and separate from the chaos we'd left behind. My father moved to Canada shortly after, offering me a sense of familiarity and family that felt genuine and uncomplicated. His presence became a grounding influence, a reminder that not all family ties had to be complicated. With him around, I felt a kind of stability and support that I hadn't felt in years. Together, we started building a small life here, creating new routines and settling into a community. For the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't haunted by the shadows of the past. Looking back now, I see our relationship for what it truly was, a chapter, one filled with good intentions that somehow lost its way. I don't hate Hannah, and maybe in time, I'll even feel gratitude for the hard lessons learned. But as I close this chapter and continue building a life in Montreal, I know that what I have now is real, grounded in my own choices, and free from the pressures that once held me captive.
Keep watching our stories by clicking on one of the videos that appear on the screen, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to be alerted about new videos. See you next time.